What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. I hope with the season of the deep, everybody has been having a blast taking out those fishing rods, getting into those ponds, catching ourselves a bunch of different fish. And one of my favorite relaxing parts after build crafting, going through raids, is definitely that fishing. But more importantly, we do have some fantastic changes this season to our sandbox, exotics, etc., as well as some of our subclasses, and Arc this season is being highlighted heavily, so we are getting into it with a banger Arc Warlock build for y'all, taking advantage of the Fallen Sunstar helmet, giving us those ionic traces that are improved, allowing us to just spam abilities with that Arc subclass, stunning champions, ad clear. It is an S tier build in my opinion. Now, moving on to our abilities, aspects, and fragments here. We're going to be using Chaos Reach for that jolting and that overload champion stun. Very nice for the endgame activities and just feels a little bit better than the ad clear of Storm Trance. Now, for abilities, I personally am going with Healing Rift, Strafe Glide, and then for our melee, it's totally up to you inside of the gameplay. I was using Chain Lightning just for that extra jolt and those champions, but I think overall, I like the Ball Lightning melee just a little bit more because we do have jolting in a lot of other ways. So it is a nice little buff that this got as well, like 25-30% for that damage inside of the PvE realm, and you get that little extra distance so you don't gotta run up to an enemy in melee. This thing, you do have quite the range. Now for the grenade, I'm going with Pulse Grenades, just feels best inside of the PvE realm, like I have said before in past videos. Now, moving on to our first aspect in Arc Souls, very important on this build as well for some of those artifact mods that we have. Casting our Rift creates Arc Souls that fire and target in front of you. Allies pass through also get the Arc Souls. Well, we are amplified, which becoming amplified is super easy with this build. Basically, just throwing your grenade gets you amplified or defeating targets with any sort of arc damage, so it is very easy. Those Arc Souls are supercharged and gain that increased fire rate. Now on top of that, we're using this electrostatic mine, so defeating targets with our arc abilities, and those Arc Souls do count as arc abilities, or defeating jolted, blinded targets creates ionic traces. Collecting those also make us amplified, and with this you'll see in our weapons as well as the artifact mods, like I said, using those ionic traces to become amplified is very nice for this build. Very easy, and we do use it for a lot of different things. Now, when we move on to our fragments, starting out, we got Spark of Beacon. While we are amplified, our special weapon, Final Blows, with the arc, create blinding explosions, which allows us to proc even more of those ionic traces via electrostatic mind. Next, we got Spark of Discharge, so those arc weapon Final Blows have a chance of creating ionic traces. Another way, like I said, so we can create all of those ionic traces everywhere and just spam our abilities. Next, we got that Arc of Resistance, so when we're by combatants, we have reduced incoming damage. Very nice for survivability and the endgame. And last but not least, Spark of Shock, so we can create that jolt another way via our grenades. Very good for overload champions, as well as creating even more ionic traces via electrostatic mind. Now, for this build inside of our kinetic slot, I personally went with Rufu's Fury. I know it has Paracausal Affinity, which doesn't work because we're using our Arc subclass instead of a Dark subclass, but that Demolitionist was really what I was going for, and I felt like I needed an auto rifle in the Strand version here with Demo for those barrier champions, and we're using a mod on our helmet to get Orbs of Power with the combination of Strand and Arc weapons, so that is why I personally went with a Strand weapon, but you can really go any weapon up here. Pulse rifle, sidearm, auto rifle, just depending on what kind of content you're going into. Now, very important for this build is Delicate Tomb. Hip shots fire a wide spread. Final blows generate ionic traces. Very very important. So we're going to be using this to create that blinding effect, as well as the final blows in general with this weapon help create those ionic traces, so it'll come into play with our aspects and fragments as well. Plus we have that Tempest Cascade, so when we collect ionic traces, it loads jolting rounds inside of the chamber, so we can use that again to jolt targets, proc electrostatic mind, get even more of those ionic traces. Like I said, the ability spam is insane. And last but not least, I'm using the Swarm Adept right here with Bottomless Grief and Dragonfly. Didn't get the best roll on this, but this thing is very good in the endgame, and like I said, I wanted to use Arc and Strand weapons for this, so I could go with something like Circular Logic as well with Hatchling Envious, but I personally chose to go with this because I know I can get a better version of it. Plus, with our mods on our armor, we're also using that Arc Surge to make these both better. Now, the reason that I am coming out with this video today and not a little bit earlier is I wanted to make sure I had all 12 of our mods unlocked. So first off for this, using that anti-barrier auto rifle, like I said, just is super nice with that Rufus Fury and just that kinetic slot in general. Now I am using authorized arc mods, authorized melee mods, and then this is what I was talking, that Technicolor Siphon, so we can have the Strand Siphon and arc mods combined, which costs 3 on our helmet, which I will show you. Now, this thing is built out super heavily on our artifact for Arc and Void, in my personal opinion. So we are using a lot of perks. We have electric armor right here, so we stayed amplified longer when we have that Arc subclass equipped. On top of that, we have granted super damage if we cast while critically wounded or amplified, lasts until the end of super activation, so these pair perfectly together. On top of that, amped up, we have a gain damage resistance while we are amplified, so comes back to being amplified longer, and we're going to be able to do that very fast and very often with this build. On the final column, we have lightning strikes twice, so after throwing an arc grenade, we gain increased grenade recharge for a short time. Arc final blows extend the duration of this benefit, so we're getting grenades back all willy-nilly and being able to just go absolutely crazy with it. And last but not least, shock and awe, which is what I am calling this video because it is absolutely nasty. Our arc final blows while we are amplified, summoning a burst of lightning that damages and jolts targets, just creating more of those ionic traces for us. It's absolutely insane. When you have a bunch of adds, you're able to get all of your abilities back so fast, and all of those arc final blows are creating almost like when you're using Cloud Strike or Thunderlord, when they have that little jolt of lightning that comes down. You're getting that with your arc souls, your grenades, your melees. It's absolutely gnarly. Now, onto our Fallen Sunstar helmet, which makes this build even better. Those ionic traces move faster to us, grant us even more ability energy, and allies also gain ability energy when we collect those, so it allows our fire team to spam their abilities, and for us, even more than normal with just an ionic trace. This thing absolutely juices them. Now, like I said, for our mods right here, we're going to use Ashes to Assets, so when we're getting all of those defeats via our Arc Grenades, we're going to get our super back even faster, and then that dual current siphon with Arc and Strand weapons, so Orbs of Power are also going to be flowing everywhere. Moving on to our arms, we got that firepower to create Orbs of Power on grenade defeats with momentum transfer as well as impact induction. So we can chain our melee and grenade back and forth with momentum. We get that grenade to reduce melee, and then impact is we get the melee to reduce our grenade. So a nice little positive feedback loop right there. Moving on to our chest piece, we have Charged Up and Concussive Dampener. You can switch off Concussive Dampener to whatever you want for more protection. You could go with Arc, Solar, whatever it may be that you're going into. Personally went with Concussive for that Nightfall that I was going into, and then the Charged Up for our Charged with Light by picking up those Orbs of Power. Moving on to the boots, since it is Artifice, we're using that extra little slot right there to get that 92 resilience with the Arc Weapon Surge on the 3-stack. So our Delicate Tomb as well as our Swarm is going to be doing that nice extra damage consistently because we're creating Orbs of Power with basically everything that we have in our weapons as well as our abilities. So it is super nice to have that Arc Surge on for endgame. And last but certainly not least, we have Reaper time dilation on our bond for that Orbs of Power after we cast our Rift, and then time dilation so that Arc weapon surge lasts just a little bit longer, allowing us to juice enemies, do that extra DPS, whatever it may be. Like I said, with this build, absolutely nasty how fast we can get back our abilities, especially with our grenades because of our artifact mods. We're able to stay amplified longer, take less damage while we're amplified, and then also get even more super damage because of that and the amplification. So this build absolutely insane this season. Like I said, for your kinetic weapon, you can switch out with whatever you want. I was going with that auto rifle with demo just so I could get the anti-barriers plus my grenade back even a little bit faster, but most of the time, like 95% of the time, I'm using that delicate tomb to create even more ionic traces, which again allow for that insane ability spam on this build. And I think this is going to be a very fun build for the entirety of the season, and even in the future this is going to be viable. But with those arc mods on our artifact, like I said, this thing is absolutely nasty. So hopefully y'all enjoy this build. A lot more to come. We have 3 new exotics, like I said, a lot of sandbox changes to our subclasses, to our exotics in general. So gonna be going over a lot of content. Make sure you don't miss it. Hit that bell and the subscribe button so y'all can keep coming back and keep building up this community. So thank you guys again for that support. I appreciate it. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.